Welcome to Dead Reckoning with Nicole. And today I want to talk to you about why you should ditch your sun sign and get used to talking about your rising sign. Let's start at the beginning. Well, not the real beginning, less than 100 years ago. In August of 1930, a newspaper editor in London needed a fresh angle on a royal birth, so he called the most famous astrologer in Britain. That man was busy, so his assistant took the job instead. That was a man named R.H. Naylor, and the job he got by default became one of the most successful media formats in human history. We've all read our horoscope, right? The newspaper had to include an introduction explaining what a horoscope even was, because in 1930, no one had actually seen one. The article that was titled "What the Stars Foretell for the New Princess" predicted that Princess Margaret, who is Princess Elizabeth's younger sister, for those youngins, would lead an eventful life, and it was enormously popular. Readers wrote in wanting more. And then later in that same year, he also predicted that a British aircraft would be in danger. In October, a British airship crashed in France and it killed 48 people. And he was credited with the prediction, and they gave him a column. But by 1937, he had a bit of a problem. He wanted his column to reach more people than just the people who had birthdays in that exact week. And so he had to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to do that. So he looked at the chart and found the one planet predictable enough to be in the same part of the sky on the same day every single year. And of course, that's the sun. If you know someone's birthday, you already know their sun sign. No birth time required, no chart required, no astrologer required. And sun sign astrology was born. It was vague enough that anybody can see themselves in it, and accessible enough for a newspaper column. So astrology has been around for thousands of years. The way you've been taught to use it hasn't even been around for 100 years. So why does your horoscope never quite fit? Why does it feel like it's describing somebody who kind of looks like you, but isn't really you? And that's because it isn't you. It was a system that was designed to sell newspapers. We got to ditch that. We're not trying to sell newspapers anymore. So what is your rising sign? I thought you'd never ask. So the rising sign is a sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the exact moment you took your first breath. Your soul enters from the east and imprints that sign's characteristics onto you. So this is why your exact birth time matters. It sets the stage for the whole chart. Sun sign horoscopes work by placing the sun in the first house and reading the chart from there. Your rising sign is your first house. It's the actual you, the lens through which everything else in your chart is filtered. So when Naylor built his system, he had to pick one thing that everybody knew. Without a chart reading, they were really rare. And he picked the sun, and it was the right choice for a newspaper column. But it's the wrong choice for your actual life. Side note, the rising sign changes every 2 hours. So it is more you than your sun sign, which covers a whole 30 days of everybody who was born at the same time as you. And so here is why I'm talking about this. First and foremost, details matter. And second, astrology is the study of archetypes and cycles. As above, so below. And so to get the details right, you need a precision instrument. You need your rising sign. So I've built 12 workbooks based on your rising sign. And these are not to take the place of an actual chart reading. They complement the chart reading you're going to get done or have already had. But even the best chart readings don't get to talk about the base energy of your chart. A reading is focused on planets and aspects and the technical architecture of your chart because that's the instrument, and you need someone to actually be able to read the instrument correctly. But there's a whole layer underneath all of that, which is the actual felt experience of living within your rising sign. Day to day, the emotional and mythic territory of it. And the reading just doesn't have room to sit inside that. There just isn't time in a single session to go that deep on top of covering the chart itself. And so there's a gap there, right? And that's the gap that the workbooks live within. They don't replace a reading. They're not trying to. What they do is take you into the energy underneath those planets and aspects. The workbook is depth work. The reading is a precision instrument, and you genuinely want both. When the workbooks were delivered, my son reached for his sun sign, as a person is wont to do, even when his mother's an astrologer and is constantly telling him he needs to know his rising sign. So I handed him his rising sign workbook, and he sat down with it and he started reading it. And he got to the journaling questions, and he's like, do all of the workbooks have the same journaling questions? Because these seem really targeted. And I laughed and I was like, well, they're meant to be targeted for your rising sign. And my girlfriend, who beta tests all my stuff for me, thank her every day, asked me if she was the only person I knew with her rising sign. In other words, did you write this specifically for me? For your sign, yes. For you, no. I don't want to be the astrologer who talks at you about your chart like I know your life better than you do, because I don't. I'm the translator. You were born fluent in the language of your life and your chart. You just never had anyone hand you the dictionary. So the Astrolabe series is my attempt to hand you the dictionary, but built like something you actually use, not something you read once and then put on the shelf. Every workbook is built around one rising sign. They're each over 100 pages long, and it's organized around 12 mythic gates, because your rising sign isn't just a personality trait. It's the doorway your whole chart opens through. And each house behind that doorway has its own territory, its own myth, and its own work to do. Inside, you're not just reading about your sign. You're doing the work. 60 plus journaling prompts built to actually excavate something, not just to entertain you for an afternoon. Embodied rituals for each gate, because insight that lives in your head doesn't change anything. It has to move into the body to actually stick. And then there's a token system, 12 physical objects, one per gate. So by the time you finish the book, you don't just have a stack of notes, you have something tangible marking the ground that you've covered. I built it that way because I want you to have multiple angles to get to the same information. You know, some people feel things, some people are, in their head, some people like something to touch. I gave multiple different ways to be able to access your energy. And you can do the rituals if you want to. You can answer the coaching questions. I mean, if you want to. I really think you should. That's really where the deep work is. We all have a different, even within the same rising sign, we're all going to experience those areas of life in slightly different ways. Obviously, if you have planets there, it's going to color that as well. That's why you need the reading. But anyways, this isn't a workbook you're going to cover in one setting and put on a shelf. It's going to be a companion. It's something you can come back to over and over again and re-excavate, or as you're living your life and you can go deeper into a topic. So one other piece that I want to talk about the workbooks is the story that you tell yourself. So most of us are walking around with a story about ourselves that we picked up somewhere along the way. A parent, a teacher, an offhanded comment that stuck. And we never go back and check whether that's actually true. So I had one of those for most of my life, a story I told myself so many times, I stopped questioning, and it kept me from starting things because I was so sure how the story would end before I ever began. So why even bother? Because this is just who I am, right? Wrong. And the whole point with astrology is you can start to tell yourself a better story, a truer story, one that's based on the whole picture and not just a comment that someone made to you one day. That's the work these workbooks are really built for. Not learn some facts about your rising sign. To rewrite the sentence you've been saying to yourself since you were a kid, using the one piece of evidence that was true the entire time, the sky, at the exact moment you arrived. So the next 12 episodes of Dead Reckoning with Nicole will be me going into each of the signs and talking a little bit about the lived experience of each and reading the myth of becoming for each of them. You don't need to know anything about astrology to watch these, and I want to make this clear because it really matters to me. I'm not an astrologer who does a little coaching on the side. I'm a life coach. Astrology is the tool that I use to do that work. It's the instrument, not the point. The point is always you and your life and the story that you're actually living. The chart just happens to be the most precise tool that I've found for getting there. So you don't need the vocabulary. You don't need to know a single glyph. You just need to know one thing before you pick which episode is actually yours. Your rising sign. The whole point of this video. So here's your homework. Before the next episode, and it only takes about 5 minutes, and probably your birth certificate. To find your rising sign, you need 3 things. Your birth date, I bet you know that one. Your birth time, you might need a birth certificate for that, and your birthplace. And to pull up your free chart at astroseek.com, it's the cleanest, easiest calculator out there for non-astrology people. Or if you already have a favorite astrologer, you can just ask them. Once you know your rising sign, come back and there's a workbook waiting for you. And I promise once you read the first gate, that kind of not really me feeling is going to disappear, because maybe for the first time, you're going to be reading something that was actually built to describe you. And I'll see you in the next episode.